If you have any doubts about using Meta ads for B2B, take a quick look at one of our clients here that's driving over 100 scheduled demos every single month from Meta with a cost per opportunity of $2,000 to $4,000 on average and a cost per demo as low as $849. And this is going after mid-market and enterprise companies. If you're watching this video, you want to make Meta ads work for B2B, but unfortunately on YouTube, the majority of the Facebook ads content out there is around e-commerce and B2C. When it comes to B2B, we can't really sell to everyone, so it fundamentally changes how we approach scaling Meta ads. If you're new to the channel, I'm Silvio Perez. I'm the founder of AdConversion. We teach 9,000 plus B2B marketers how to master ads, and we manage over $40 million a year in ad spend for top B2B SaaS brands. If you want to become a Meta ads expert, then you need to understand how the auction works because it's going to directly affect your strategy, and how you approach Meta is very different compared to how you approach other platforms like LinkedIn ads. Let's first start by talking about Andromeda. This was a big update by Facebook, and this is really important for you to understand if you want to become a B2B Meta ads expert. So there's two big changes to Meta ads algorithm. One of them was the Andromeda update, and the other one was the release of the new generative ads model, or GEM for short. These two things are really changing the game on how the Meta ads algorithm works right now in 2026 and moving forward. So the first thing with Andromeda, the way to think about Andromeda is basically a machine learning model. It's an algorithm that essentially Meta uses to process your ads. It'll study your ads, and then based on your ads and your campaign details, it'll use all that information to then essentially figure out who they should target, who your ad needs to reach, who the right person is for your ad creative, because Meta is moving more and more towards Advantage Plus and automating the process of targeting and placement selection. And Meta really wants to be in the driver's seat of deciding who is the best person to reach based on the context of your ad and the details of your campaigns. So one really important thing to call out here from this support article is you will notice that Meta really needs a lot of volume of creative in order to do this. I really want to highlight this. The retrieval process, it's 3 orders of magnitude ads more than subsequent stages. So they need 3 orders of magnitude more ads. Basically in English, what that means is they need more ad variations, because with more ad variations, they can better fine tune their machine learning model to better understand who do you want to go after, what's important for you, what's resonating, etc. So we need higher quality creatives. So on the front end, we have Andromeda that's essentially acting as like this filtering mechanism. And then on the last point is we have GEM, and what GEM is doing is GEM is looking at all of the interactions of a user on Facebook in terms of what are they interacting with, both organically and in terms of ads. And then through GEM and Andromeda, that is basically the recipe or the algorithm that is deciding ultimately where your ad gets placed. So I know this can be quite conceptual, so I kind of just doodled this out a bit just to give you some more context. I know this is super conceptual, so I just wanted to give you a concrete example of how I interpret Andromeda and the GEM update. Obviously, I'm not a Meta ads engineer, so bear with my understanding. But fundamentally, this is the way how I conceptualize those two things coming together. You have your ads, right? So you have your ads that you put into your campaign, and you need a lot of them, right? You need more variations, but not just variations for the sake of variations. Unique creative concepts is really what you're looking for. And then with these unique creative concepts, Andromeda is now scanning your ads. It's trying to understand the ad copy. It's doing visual analysis and breaking down your images if you're using them, or your carousels, your videos. If you're running videos, it's looking at the transcripts of those videos. It's looking at your targeting suggestions. It's looking at all of this information to basically filter down and say, okay, of all of the concepts that you gave me, I think these two are worth a damn, right? And I think we should actually serve some impressions behind them. And then finally, you have this last piece, which is GEM. And what GEM is doing is it's saying, and this is a brutal stick figure, but basically what GEM is saying, oh, John over here is probably the best candidate for you based on the creative concepts that were selected, because John was doing these things organically. They had these interactions, this activity online. They also interact with these types of ads in the past. So, 2 and 2 makes 1 in the algorithm here, and boom, there you go. Your ad gets served to them. So what does this mean for you in plain speak? This means for you as the advertiser, you really need to focus on this, right? Because all of this is pretty much out of your control, right? This is all the meta ads algorithm. However, with B2B, it gets a bit more complicated because with B2B, there is a place for broad targeting, right? Where you're letting Meta and the Andromeda update really do its thing, where you're just saying, hey, go full broad using my ad creative and my concepts and the details I give you in my campaign creation. You figure out how to get in front of the people I care about. I think you should totally try this, but it's still not perfect. And when it comes to B2B specifically, especially if you're enterprise focused and you can only sell to a certain amount of companies, then, you're going to really struggle with this, right? If there's only 500 companies you can sell to in the world, then you're really going to struggle with this. And that's where the algorithm is getting much better. However, you should still need to focus on your audience validation first, which is where I think B2B is fundamentally different from B2C with meta ads. Because if you watch any Facebook ads tutorial for B2C, they'll all tell you the same thing. Go full broad, create as many unique creative concepts as you can. Once you find a winning concept, double down on it, scale it, and continue to feed the machine. However, with B2B, if you only have a fixed universe, right, using those 500 companies as an example, then full broad targeting might still not be what you need. And at the end of the day, it's not going to work out. So now that we have that necessary context out there, let's talk about choosing the right strategy based on your goals and how to further think about this as a B2B advertiser on Facebook. So we talked about the algorithm, and I really hope you enjoyed that visual. Let's segue now into strategy and how to think about strategy. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to simplify this in terms of 3 types of campaigns. There's prospecting, there's remarketing, and there's acceleration. You could also make a case there's revival and there's expansion, but just for the sake of simplicity, let's just focus on these 3. Prospecting campaigns are pretty straightforward, and this is basically where you're trying to target strangers. Okay, you're trying to go after strangers, people who don't necessarily know about you, but they're the right type of person. And when it comes to prospecting campaigns, I think the big thing that you really need to take to heart here, and if you want to find success with meta ads as a B2B advertiser, is your data is everything. Your data is the difference between profitability and loss. It really is fundamental, especially the more niche your focus. The less niche, the less targeted you are in terms of like reaching certain businesses, then obviously you can lean a bit broader. So when it comes to prospecting, I highly recommend that you start off by leveraging your data. So specifically when I say leverage your data, I mean leverage your first party data. So your first party data is the data that you own. It's the stuff that you've collected directly from your customers. So for example, when it comes to first party data, we have things like our CRM. And in our CRM, it's a treasure trove of first party data, right? These are email addresses that you've collected from prospects that have signed up. And essentially what we're doing is we want to leverage the CRM data. And the first place to start is we want to use lookalikes. So what I highly recommend and what we've seen a lot of success with our clients is taking a lookalike audience of their best fit prospects or their best fit customers and then creating a 1 to 2% lookalike off that. I highly recommend you start with the 1% first, validate audience quality, and then in the future you can scale to a 2 and so on and so forth. So your first party data is incredible. The next place I really recommend that you validate is your third party sources. So third party sources are basically where you are buying data or you're borrowing data from outside vendors that have collected data on their own behalves, and now they're able to sell it to you. So for instance, there's 2 recommendations here. One is Primer. So Primer is a website. You can go check it out. I'm not sponsored by them, but to be honest, I probably should be at this point. And they are great in terms of giving you basically LinkedIn-like targeting on a platform like Meta. So what platforms like Primer do, and also there's metadata as well that you can leverage. There used to be Clearbit also, but now that they got acquired by HubSpot, I'm not really sure what the future of them holds. But basically you have these opportunities. You can also go to Google and just search, like, for example, I remember I had a client that really need to go after certain Shopify stores, and they wanted to target Shopify stores that had, certain amounts of revenue and these types of like very nuanced data that you can't buy normally. So what we did was we did some homework. We went to Google and we started to research unique data providers, and then we did a custom deal with them. So you can really take this and scale data as a strategy for the business. But essentially with these tools like Primer, metadata, Clearbit, etc., what they're doing is they're basically aggregating all this data, And then they're creating an identity graph. So when you go into their platforms, you can basically create an audience based on firmographics, technographics, the list goes on. And basically you can create these custom audiences. They will then go try to match the details of the people that you're trying to target against their identity graph. And then they will upload a list of contacts into LinkedIn as a first-party source that you can then target with ads. So example, if you're doing ABM, you upload a list of companies into one of these tools. They will then try to find the personal emails and work emails of the contacts working at those companies. And then based on the additional filters you put against that targeting, they might dwindle down a bit more. And then finally, they will upload that list into Meta for targeting. Sounds super complicated, but it's much simpler than it sounds. And basically what this does is it gives you another way to target these individuals where you wouldn't be able to normally. And it allows you, again, to extend and scale your data as a strategy. And then finally, once you've exhausted first-party data, third-party sources, then from here, I really recommend that you consider full broad. And it doesn't mean you have to do it in this specific order. I would personally do it in that way in terms of quality. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to validate the quality of the audience. So I'll show you what this looks like and we'll bring it all together when we start to build up the campaign structures. But essentially, I've got my first party data. I want to see, okay, run a test. What are the quality of the leads that are coming in? Do the same thing for these different sources. And then finally, you can do the same thing for full broad. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow you to reach strangers in multitudes of ways, depending on who you're going after. The second campaign strategy is remarketing. This is going after people that know you, right? People that know you. So these are people that have been to your website. These are people that maybe there are certain CRM lists. But fundamentally, it's somebody that's found you some way, shape, or form. They've already engaged with your brand online, and now you're trying to bring them back, right? And there's a whole bunch of segments on Meta. For example, people that have been to your Instagram page, people that watch certain percentages of video, etc. And remarketing is fantastic because if you're very active on LinkedIn or you're very active on Google and you already have a lot of confidence that you are reaching the right people on those channels, a really easy place to get started is with custom URLs. And what I mean by custom URLs is, you can create a custom URL of website visitors that contain your UTMs from these other channels that you have validated. So like for instance, if I'm using LinkedIn as my source, my medium is paid social, I can create a website retargeting segment in Meta of anyone that's been to my website with those UTM parameters. And now I can retarget my LinkedIn traffic on a platform like Meta. This obviously assumes you have enough traffic in the first place, but this is a really easy advanced way for you to just get started by targeting the people you've already validated on other platforms. Outside of this, of course, you have, your broad remarketing segments. So this is anybody that's been to your website, anybody that's watched certain videos, anybody that's been to your Facebook page, your Instagram page, etc. This is another great way for you because at the end of the day, like if somebody is coming to your website today in some way, shape, or form, it makes sense to continue to stay in front of them, especially when it comes to B2B and we're dealing with long sales cycles. Just staying top of mind is truly half the battle. And then finally, we have acceleration. And I don't think acceleration will be applicable for many of you, but I think it's worth saying because in a B2B context, the game isn't over once the demo is created or the meeting happens, right? Once the opportunity is created, it's really the first step in a long sales process. So acceleration is where we're running ads against open opportunities. So what you can do is using first-party data or third-party sources, you can essentially, using those examples I used earlier, I can target my existing open opportunities and I can run ads against them, assuming my audience size is large enough. And now I can try to improve the win rates, shorten the sales cycles, essentially just be a good partner to sales and try to move those deals to close one faster. Putting it all together, this is the recommendation that I suggest based on the time of this recording of if you're getting into Meta ads as a B2B advertiser and you're like, okay, Sylvia, just give me the roadmap. This is the roadmap I would give you. First, start with remarketing. This is a no-brainer, right? These people are already going to your website. You should just stay in front of them. And remarketing really becomes more powerful when it's across channels, right? So you create that omnipresence where somebody goes to LinkedIn, they see you, they go to Meta, they see you. You really create that grandioseness, right? That propinquity in the eyes of the user. A big word just basically means you're showing up often and everywhere. And really, that's what we're going after. And perception truly is reality when it comes to B2B, where the cool thing about this too, it's like you can have such a small budget, and because the audience is so small, you don't need a large budget. And in their mind, they're like, my God, these people are everywhere. When the reality is like, you're just really focusing on a super specific segment of users. The second one is prospecting. You are going to hit a wall with remarketing eventually, depending on how large your remarketing audiences are. How soon you hit it will vary, but you will hit it eventually. And that's why now it's time to go on offense and do prospecting, because with prospecting, we're going to actually get in front of strangers and we're going to create a much faster flywheel in terms of driving new business. And then lastly, if applicable, you can run acceleration campaigns. And now we're trying to move this sales cycle much further, faster in terms of win rates and deal speed. I just wanted to take a second and say, if you're loving this video, you will absolutely love our free courses over at AdConversion.com. You can sign up and get access to our Google Ads courses, Reddit Ads courses, LinkedIn Ads courses. They're seriously free. You can check them out, no less than longer than 10 minutes. We're doing this because we want to create the best place in the world to master B2B ads. So if that's you, you can check out our wall of love. Come join us at AdConversion.com. And I hope you get tremendous value from our courses. Now that you have this meta roadmap in place in terms of how to get started, right? Let's go walk through the actual meta ads manager and how to put this into practice, just conceptually, so that you can put theory into practice and not make those first mistakes actually launching your campaigns. Because unfortunately, sometimes how you start is how you finish. And if you choose the wrong settings or, simple things like this, it can really cause a lot of consequences. So when it comes to the campaign structure, there is no one best campaign structure. I'm just going to dispel that myth right now. No one has the secret structure that's going to change the game for you. At the end of the day, all structures have different intended purposes and they can all work. But I think what matters most is the logic and the thinking and the rationale. And does it make sense based on what you're trying to achieve? So what I would suggest is, because there's two paths you can go, and ultimately the first variable that we need to validate as a B2B advertiser on Meta is we need to understand, can we actually get in front of the right quality leads? Because if we can't, it doesn't matter how many ads we've created of our creative concepts, our CTR, our CPA, our conversion rates, all of that is pointless. We need to know, first and foremost, is the right person on the other side of my ad? And the way we're going to set that up and the way we're going to validate that is by making sure we're testing audiences separately. We do not want to cluster all of our audiences together in the beginning and then not have understanding on which audience is actually doing the work. We need to really understand, first and foremost, can we target the right audience? Once we've validated that, now we can really scale our creative testing. So there's two ways you can do this, and I'm going to walk you through both. One way you can do this is you can create one campaign using ABO, and you're going to create one ad set for each specific audience, and then you're going to validate and test. So let me walk you through an example. Let's say we're going to do a sales campaign, and I'm going to go ahead and say this is a prospecting campaign. We're going to do ABO, and this is going to be audience validation, right, as an example. And what we're going to do is we're going to switch from a campaign budget to an ad set budget. And what this will do is it'll allow us to set specific budget targets for each ad set. If you're going to be structuring your campaign like this for audience validation in this way, turn this off so that you guarantee those ad sets spend the budget that you give them. And then what we're going to do is for each ad set, we're going to basically segment it based on the audience we want to target. So for example, let's say this one is going to be that 1% lookalike. This is focusing on first party data. What I'll do here is I'm just going to choose a conversion event. Now I'll come down here to audience. By default, Meta's pushing Advantage Plus. So what we're going to do in the sake of this test is, because we're not using full broad targeting, we are going to switch this. So we're going to click further limit the reach of our ads. And we're going to say further limit, continue. And what we're going to do is we're going to adjust our detailed targeting based on the lookalike audiences that we care about. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a custom audience. In this case, we would add our custom audience of our 1% lookalike. I don't have anything in this account because it's a tutorial account, but I would choose it and I would apply those settings here. And now this one's just targeting my 1% lookalike. The other thing too is by default, Meta will have Advantage Plus placements on. That's fine if you have creatives for each placement, and you can set that at the ad level. Meta lets you personalize the creative based on the placement. So now that we've created this ad set targeting on 1% lookalikes, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to do the exact same process for each audience segment that I want to validate. So for instance, maybe next I want to do, let's say, job titles. And in this case, it's job titles using third-party data. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing here, right? Whatever that is for you. And maybe this is like my primer audience or my metadata audience, whatever it might be. I'll now create the segment for this. Maybe the next one is going to be, using some of Facebook's capabilities. So Facebook has like interests and titles that they give you. Maybe it's interests and titles from Facebook. I'll create a set for that. And then I'll set dedicated budgets for each one of them. And then what I'm going to do is in each one of these ad sets, I'm going to have the same ads. Because again, I just want to know which audiences are actually driving the right quality leads. And if you don't have a good landing page set up where you're able to convert leads and an offer that's able to convert cold traffic, so for example, a bad offer here would be a demo request, unless you're going after an SMB audience. But if you're going after a niche enterprise audience, it's going to be hard to get demos off of cold traffic. So that's where like a webinar or a free trial, something a bit easier to convert on is better, because really what we want here is we just want to see the titles of the people who are coming in. Alternatively, if you don't have a good landing page, you can switch the objective from sales to leads, and then you can run a lead gen campaign. And that'll make it much easier for you to understand the quality of the leads coming in. And in that lead gen form, make sure you have job titles on there as a field and company. But essentially what I would do is with this audience validation test, I would now have, again, the same ads for each one. And then I'd have a dedicated budget for each one and I'd launch it. And as I launch it, now I'll start to get leads and I'll look at the leads that are coming in and I'll say, okay, these leads are coming from this interest ad set versus these leads are coming from this 1% lookalike, audit the quality. Now that I have confidence and I'm like, wow, that's actually pretty good, let's scale it. Once I've validated the audience, now I would create a CBO campaign, which is campaign budget optimization, where I'm targeting that specific audience that's a winner based on quality. And now I'm going hard on testing different creative concepts and really trying to scale my creative output. So for instance, that might look like prospecting CBO. And let's say our winner was the 1% lookalike. It would look something like this. And now I'm using campaign budget optimization. And now each ad set, I would go deeper around creative testing. So for example, there's two ways you can do it. Really just depends on your preference. One is you could have different ad sets based on creative concepts. So for example, maybe I have this one that's UGC. And then I have another one that is before and after. And now I don't really necessarily care as much that each ad set gets equal distribution in terms of budget spend. I really want Meta to do its thing and push the ad sets that have the winning creative concepts, and then I'll continue to double down. Alternatively, what we can do is instead of having different ad sets by concepts, we can think of them in terms of batches. So for example, maybe I would have like creative batch 1 or creative test 1, and in creative batch 1, I might have before and after UGC, memes, etc., different concepts. And then I create a new batch based on the learnings of the first batch. And now with the second batch, I'll say, creative batch 2, doubling down on the winners, etc., right? Iterating. And then I'll see what's working versus what's not. And this is an awesome way to just scale those winning audiences further through more creative concepts. And you could take the same approach and apply it to the other ones. Now, if you are starting already with Meta and you already have some history and you already know what works and you have some campaigns that are working, you might skip the, ABO audience validation step and you might just go straight to like building campaigns out, targeting specific audiences. That's totally cool. And for instance, like maybe in my audience validation test, I was like, wow, full broad actually did much better than I expected. Now I could create a dedicated campaign just going after full broad. So I hope this gives you some context and some clarity. If you guys want more information around meta ads, let me know in the comments. If this video was valuable, if you can give it a thumbs up, it'll really help grow our reach as a small channel. And you can subscribe so you can be notified of future videos. And I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much.